You're listening to the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast. Remember to like, share, comment, subscribe, and click the bell to make sure you get the latest episodes of the podcast. Be sure to like and share our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and on Instagram. Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast. And on today's episode, we're reviewing the ODI and T20 series between Australia and Pakistan. Pakistan outplayed Australia in the ODI series, winning that 2-1 to claim their first ODI series win in Australia since 2002. Australia weren't at their best in that ODI series. Their batting let them down big time, and that's why they lost the series. But then in the T20 series, Australia bounced back and redeemed themselves after a very poor ODI series. They won this T20 series 3-0, and Pakistan weren't up to the task in this T20 series. Their batting, bowling failed them at times during this T20 series. So both teams winning one series apiece, the ODI series to Pakistan, the T20 series to Australia. And throughout both the ODI and T20 series, there was lots to talk about from both teams' point of view in terms of how they performed across the ODIs and T20s. Certainly, both teams will have a lot of questions to try and answer. I think both Australia and Pakistan will do that as they reflect from these two series. But they'll also look at the positives and what they did well. And I think both teams will be very happy with their performances across both ODI and T20 series. So there's plenty to discuss in this episode today as we review the ODI and T20 series between Australia and Pakistan. Without further ado, let's get into it. Now, let's have a look at the results for the ODIs and T20s between Australia and Pakistan. We'll start with the ODI series results. Australia won the first game in Melbourne by 2 wickets. Mitchell Starc was named player of the match. The second ODI in Adelaide, Pakistan won that by 9 wickets. Haris Rauf was named player of the match. And the third game in Perth, Australia lost that game. Pakistan won the last game by 8 wickets. Haris Rauf was named player of the match, and Pakistan won the series 2-1, and Haris Rauf was named player of the series, and rightly so, for his outstanding bowling performance. Then we moved on to the T20 series, 3 games across Australia. Australia won the first T20 up there at the Gabba. It was a rain-shortened match to 7 overs aside. They won that by 29 runs. Glenn Maxwell was named player of the match. The second T20 in Sydney, Australia won that by 13 runs. Spencer Johnson was named player of the match for his 5-wicket haul. And the third and final game at Bellerive Oval in Tasmania and Hobart, Australia won by 7 wickets. Marcus Stoinis was named player of the match for his cameo innings. And Australia won the series 3-0. And Spencer Johnson was named player of the series, and rightly so, because he had a pretty good series with the ball. So those are some of the ODI and T20 results across the two series between Australia and Pakistan. Now then, let's talk about how both Australia and Pakistan went in the ODI series, talk about their performances with bat and ball and what they did well and what they didn't do so well across the 3 games in this ODI series. First of all, let's start with Australia. And leading run scorer for the series was Steve Smith. He only played 2 games, 79 runs he scored in the series. Leading wicket taker was Mitchell Starc and Adam Zampa, both of them taking 3 wickets each for Australia. A 2-1 series defeat for Australia. They weren't quite at their best in this ODI series. Obviously, a lot of talk about the test players being rested in the last game. Obviously, Australia putting out a second string 11. The batting was pretty poor across the series. To be, bowled out for 163 and 140 in the last 2 games was disappointing. They scraped over the line in Melbourne, chasing 203. If it wasn't for Pat Cummins, they would have lost that game. No batter in the Australian batting throughout the series scored a 50. The highest score was Josh Inglis with 49, and that was in game number 1 when he had that partnership with Smith. The highest partnership in the series in terms of a batting perspective was Smith and Inglis, and that was in game number 1 in Melbourne when they put on 85 for the 3rd wicket. The bowlers found it tough to defend these low sort of targets of 163 and 140. Didn't have much to play with in terms of runs. Some of the Australian batters were exposed by Harris Ralph and that extra pace that he possesses. So it really wasn't a great series for Australia. And obviously Pat Cummins and Andrew McDonald admitted that, certainly after the Adelaide defeat, which was very, very poor indeed. So let's have a bit of a recap of how each of the games went for Australia across this ODI series. We'll start with game number one. They were chasing 204. A straightforward run chase. They made it difficult for themselves, but got the job done in the end, all thanks to another superb Pat Cummins innings. And his innings and the partnership he had with Mitchell Starc in that game pretty much got Australia over the line. They had a bit of a batting collapse where they lost 3 for none in 5 balls. They lost Inglis, and then obviously Harris Ralph came in and got rid of Labuschagne and Maxwell in consecutive deliveries, and that's where the game started to turn on its head. So in game one, the batting was iffy. The bowling was pretty good. They bowled Pakistan out for 203, which was a good result, but the batting looked a bit sketchy, and that was pretty much a sign of things to come, really, in the series. And then we head to game 2 in Adelaide, where they lost quite badly by 9 wickets in Adelaide. Batting first, they were bowled out for 163. That was disappointing. There was poor shot selection, poor decision-making. They couldn't build partnerships. No batter got a start at all. On an Adelaide Oval pitch that was pretty good for batting, they pretty much let themselves down. And to be bowled out for 163 just indicated some of the problems that Australia encountered with their batting throughout the whole entire series. And then obviously the bowlers found it tough work in the second game at Adelaide. Defending 163 was never going to happen. And that's why they lost by 9 wickets. Pakistan did really well in the run chase not to lose too many wickets. So that's what happened in game 2 of the series. And then the third game, which was in Perth, yet again, the same story as the first 2 games. Batted first, made a low score, bowled out for 140, just like in Adelaide and in Melbourne. Poor again with the bat. Again, poor shot selection, couldn't build partnerships. No one really got a start. They struggled against Harris Ralph again and the Pakistan bowlers on a very, quick and bouncy surface in Perth. So the batting once again failed. The bowlers didn't have much runs to play with again. They pretty much, needed a bit of luck, but that wasn't going to happen. And that's pretty much what happened in the third game of the series for Australia. So there was a common theme throughout the ODI series for Australia. The batting didn't quite fire. The bowlers, even though they did a very good job in taking wickets, they didn't have enough runs to play with, especially in games 2 and 3. And that was the problem. And it's a really concerning, sort of thing for Australia with their batting, is that no one made a 50, no one made 100. Usually you want to see a batter or 2 make a 50 and probably go on and make 100. And that wasn't the case in this ODI series. And that's where they let themselves down. Pretty much the batting pretty much cost them, really. If they batted a bit better, Australia, then the bowlers would have had something to bowl to, and they would have won this series probably. But in the end, they lost 2-1, and they've got a lot of questions to answer, especially going into a Champions Trophy next year, in terms of, their batting in particular, playing this aggressive type style. Obviously, Matt Short, Jake Fraser-McGurk would be disappointed. It was a new opening partnership. Obviously, Travis Head didn't play in this series, along with Mitchell Marsh, who would have been in the series. Both of them were taking some leave because of some family time with their partners who gave birth to their first and second children. So they wanted to spend some time there. So that's why they didn't play in the series. But Matt Short, Jake Fraser-McGurk had an opportunity to, really cement a spot alongside Travis Head as the opening partnership with him. And they really had poor series, really. They were very disappointing across the 3 games. So, for Australia, a lot of questions, a lot of reflection. Obviously, it was a bit hard in this series because obviously the Test series with India, the priority is obviously with the Test series, of course. And that's why, in the last game, they pretty much played an 11 that's sort of the future, really. And that's what happened there. So at the end of the day, they didn't quite execute with the bat. The bowlers didn't have enough runs to play with, and Pakistan just played better. It's simple as that, really. And that's why Australia lost this series 2-1 in the way they did. So a very disappointing ODI series for Australia. Let's talk about Pakistan and their performance in the ODI series and have a look back at how they did across the 3 games. A 2-1 series win is a terrific result for Pakistan. Could have been 3-0. If they batted a bit better in Melbourne, it could have been 3-0. But a 2-1 series win is still a great result anyway, regardless. They outplayed Australia in pretty much, you would say, the 3 games. But even though they lost the first game, they pushed Australia till the end, even though they didn't win. But in games 2 and 3, they were pretty dominant, and they dominated Australia. They backed their bowling attack. They didn't really play, they didn't really bowl their part-time bowlers. They pretty much had the faith in Haris Rauf and Shaheen Shah Afridi, Naseem Shah and Hassanein to get the job done. And all of them did because Australia's batting wasn't up to the mustard. Pakistan performed well in the series. Obviously, their first ODI series win in Australia since 2002. What was impressive throughout the whole entire series was the opening partnership between Aroob and Shafiq, especially in games 2 and 3, where they set up the run chase for Pakistan. And, in game 2, they added 137. And in game 3, they added 84 to set up Pakistan in those run chases. And it's quite a new opening partnership that Pakistan have in one-day cricket, but it's certainly blossomed in games 2 and 3. And I think they'll be very pleased about that. Also, the other one was Haris Rauf. Across the 3 games, he made an impact. In game number 1, where he took 2 wickets of Labuschagne and Maxwell and back-to-back deliveries, that changed the game on its head. Game number 2, he took 5 wickets in Adelaide. And then in the last game in Perth, he just took wickets again and made an impact with his pace and really exposed some of the Australian batters. And he had a fantastic series. And I think Pakistan across the board would be pleased to perform well in this ODI series. A bit of a recap of what happened across the 3 games for Pakistan. The first game in Melbourne, quite simply enough, that they didn't bat well. They bowled out for 203. That was well below par. They only got up to 200 thanks to some tail ender innings from, Shaheen Shah Afridi, Naseem Shah, and Irfan Khan. They just lacked intent with the bat in that first game. A few batters struggled with the short ball. Babar Azam looked good in that first game. He made 37, but couldn't go on with it. And then the bowlers did a pretty good job to try and defend 203. They nearly did it. Obviously, Haris Rauf's spell was impactful. Australia lost 3 for none in 5 balls. He took the 2 other wickets. He got rid of Labuschagne and Maxwell in the same over in consecutive deliveries. That pretty much changed the game on its head. But obviously, Australia got the job done because of Pat Cummins, and Pakistan couldn't quite finish it off. Then we headed to game 2, where they were very dominant in Adelaide. Bowled Australia out for 163. They chased down the runs with ease. 1 for 169 they finished on. As I mentioned earlier, the excellent opening partnership between Aroob and Shafiq, 137 for that first wicket, set it up for Pakistan. And the bowlers bowled well again. Haris Rauf took 5 wickets, and pretty much that was all over, and the game was game, set, and match towards Pakistan. And then in the third and final game in Perth, pretty much the same as it was in Adelaide. Bowled Australia out again, this time for 140, chased it down comfortably, finishing on 2 for 143. Just like in Adelaide, the opening partnership again between Aroob and Shafiq at 84. Good start, and then the rest of the batters finished it off. The bowlers again dominated and pretty much put Australia under pressure. So that was pretty much the common theme for Pakistan across the series, especially the last 2 games is where they got it together and they played well. So I think it's encouraging signs for Pakistan, knowing that they're just starting to get a bit of a roll. They're starting to work together well as a team. And we saw that in this series, that if they just keep it together and keep working on the areas they need to work on, they can have success. And especially going into a Champions Trophy next year in Pakistan, which is a big occasion, home tournament at home, the occasion, they want to perform well in that tournament. And this is a good start on the path to having a good Champions Trophy. So they thoroughly deserve the series win. They outplayed Australia in the pretty much the 3 games. They could have won 3-0, but 2-1 was a fantastic result. And, they outplayed Australia. Simple as that. And that's why they deserved their, 2-1 series victory. And I think a lot of these players will be very happy with their performance. I think some of them will be disappointed in terms of not really having the series they would have liked in terms of the batting side of things. But I think majority of the players will be very pleased that they were able to contribute to what has been a very successful series. And, by far, probably Haris Rauf was the standout with the ball and probably the pick of the Pakistan players in the whole entire series, rightly so, named the player of the series. And probably, Aroob and Shafiq with the bat, probably the standouts there for Pakistan as well. Babar Azam, Mohammad, Rizwan had some scores here and there, but they would have liked a bit more runs to their tally. But, it was a team effort from Pakistan. The batters did their job, the bowlers did their job, and that's why they won the series 2-1 and thoroughly deserved their series victory. Let's move on and talk about the T20 series and talk about how Australia and Pakistan performed in this T20 series across the 3 games. We'll start with Australia and talk about their T20 series and how they went across the 3 games. A 3-0 series win after a disappointing ODI series to lose 2-1. A very good series win to win 3-0. And for new T20 captain Josh Inglis, a pretty good first series in charge, obviously in the absence of Mitchell Marsh. They batted and bowled better than Pakistan throughout the series. The new look T20 squad for Australia going into the future. They all performed well, and that's a good sign of things to come in the years to come, where Australia will move on from Stark, Cummins and Hazelwood and obviously look to the future with Spencer Johnson and Bartlett and Ellis and Hardy, and obviously Fraser McGurk and Short and so on. They perform pretty well, and they'll be very pleased with how they went about things in the series. Let's have a bit of a before we do that. Leading run scorer for the series, Marcus Stoinis, 96 runs for Australia. Leading wicket taker was Spencer Johnson with 8. And let's have a bit of a recap on how Australia went across the 3 games. The first game, pretty good win by 29 runs in a shortened T20 match at the Gabba. It was only 7 overs because of the rain. Australia adapted well in a shortened game. They batted first, made 4 for 93 from 7 overs, which was pretty much a match-winning score. Glenn Maxwell was outstanding in his cameo, where he pretty much got Australia up to that score. He had a pretty quiet ODI series, as we know, but he showcased his skills, reverse sweeps, etc., played all the shots, and his innings was key in terms of Australia getting to that score of 93 from the 7 overs. The bowling side of things, they bowled pretty well, defended 93 runs very comfortably in the end. Never allowed Pakistan to get going in the run chase. The bowlers adapted well to the conditions and the shortened game. Nathan Ellis was the best of the bowlers in that first game. He took 3 for 9 from 2 overs. And the fielding was pretty good from Australia in that first T20. The second T20 in Sydney, they won by 13 runs. And to wrap up the series, and that's where they wrapped up the series. Australia batted first, 9 for 147 from the 20 overs. They looked like getting 200 plus at one stage with the great start that they had. Obviously, Short and Fraser McGurk opening partnership of 52. And then Australia lost 5 for 95 in 11.3 overs. The loss of wickets halted the momentum, and they weren't able to get to that score of 200 plus after the great start. But besides the batting falling off a bit and losing its way, the bowlers came in and did a very good job in defending 147. Thanks to Spencer Johnson, 5 for 26 he took in that game. just like the game in Brisbane, Australia never let Pakistan into the run chase and took wickets at frequent intervals to stall Pakistan's momentum. And Pakistan weren't able to recover from that. And they weren't able to recover. And that's why they lost that second game of the series. And then the third and final game in Hobart, Australia won by 7 wickets. Bowled Pakistan out for 117, chasing 118 to win. They made light work of that. They finished it off in 11.2 overs. Marcus Stoinis was outstanding, 61 not out of 27, got the job done for Australia. He hit a big six, which hit the roof of the stand at one stage in his innings. Just shows the power that Marcus Stoinis possesses. And then the bowlers, like they did in Sydney, like they did in Melbourne, did the same in Hobart. And they were able to, pick up wickets frequently. They halted Pakistan's momentum. Pakistan were off to a good start. They were 158 from the power play. And then they lost, 9 for 56 and just fell away. Aaron Hardy bowled well, 3 for 21. And Adam Zampa, 2 for 11. Their spells were pretty much the key in terms of Australia slowing Pakistan's momentum down and taking those wickets. And once again, the fielding was pretty good for Australia in that third T20. So I think Australia, looking at this T20 series against Pakistan, will be delighted. Josh Inglis is the new captain for this series, replacing Mitchell Marsh. Just for this series, did pretty well as captain. I thought he did very well. Obviously, good learning experience for Josh Inglis as well in terms of that captaincy side of his game. But other than that, I think Australia will be very delighted and pleased with their performance. They will be, looking to build this squad that they have. Obviously, eventually, there will be a time where there's no Cummins and Stark and Hazelwood. Good to see, bowlers like Johnson and Bartlett and Ellis performing well. Also, the batting side of things with David and Hardy and Inglis. Obviously, Fraser McGurk and Short didn't have the series that he would have wanted, but they'll be hoping to learn from this series and get better. Obviously, Marcus Stoinis and Glenn Maxwell are getting on a little bit in age. They'll be hoping to, maximise the rest of their T20 career as Australia look to build towards the T20 World Cup in a couple of years' time. But I think for Australia, they'll be delighted with their performance in this series, given what was a very disappointing ODI series against Pakistan. Let's talk about Pakistan and talk about their performance across the 3 games in this T20 series. 3-0 series defeat for Pakistan. I think that's a pretty fair result. Disappointing result after what was a very good T20 series. Good ODI series turned into a very bad T20 series for Pakistan. They will rue the poor batting. They will rue the loose bowling at times. They'll rue the batting collapses. They'll rue the slow batting in Sydney in that second game. And quite simply, Pakistan's batting failed and the bowlers struggled at times. And they weren't able to, pretty much get back into the game because of those things. There were times in this series where they played well in patches and in periods of the 3 games. But in this format, in T20 cricket, you've got to be you got to play consistently well throughout the 20 overs. And Pakistan didn't do that. It was a bit of hit or miss. A few overs good with the bat, with the ball, and then the few overs very poor in the field with the ball and with the bat. And it was just up and down, really, as you would expect from Pakistan. That's just how they play their cricket. And also their fielding was poor, especially in game 2. Their fielding was dreadful. Drop catches and misfielding and ground fielding was just horrible. That's why they lost that game in Sydney the way they did. So let's recap the series for Pakistan and go back into the 3 games and talk about how they did. The first game in Brisbane, they were chasing 93 in 7 overs. They finished on 9 for 64 in a shortened game. Now, obviously, in 7 overs, all you're going to do is going to swing hard and attack from ball 1 because you've got 7 overs. You haven't got the full 20. So you've got limited time to get a move on. Basically, in that game, they never got going in the run chase with the bat. They lost wickets frequently. The bowlers didn't quite execute their lines and lengths. They leaked too many runs, especially to Glenn Maxwell. And 93 runs was just too much in the end to, concede. And that was a disappointing thing from them in that first game. The second game in Sydney, they were chasing 147. People thought that was going to be achievable for Pakistan. It wasn't. They made it very difficult. They couldn't get the job done. They were all out for 134. Just like in Brisbane, lost wickets in clumps, had a batting collapse, never got going in the run chase. They had a slow power play. They only scored 2 for 30 from 6 overs. The first 9 overs of the innings, they did not score a single boundary until the 10th over. Just showed you how slowly they batted and lacked intent, and they didn't put pressure on the Australian bowlers. Now, maybe Australian bowlers bowl what they wanted to bowl to them. But Usman Khan and Irfan Khan had a pretty good partnership of 58 for the 5th wicket. That was starting to get Pakistan back into the game. It started to put Australia a bit under pressure in that partnership. But once those two got out, that was pretty much it for Pakistan, and they left it too late, really. The bowlers did well to keep Australia to 147. They didn't start well with the ball in this second game, Pakistan. They didn't start well up front to the Australian, batting innings. Australia got off to a rapid start, but it wasn't until Haris Rauf, yet again, comes in, takes wickets. He took 2 wickets in his first over, got rid of Fraser McGurk and Inglis, and that pretty much helped Pakistan drag it back. And obviously Abbas Afridi, Muqueeb, the wrist spinner, pretty much helped Haris Rauf try and peg it back for Pakistan. And as I mentioned, the fielding. Now in this game with Pakistan's fielding, now we know historically Pakistan aren't so good in the field. That's just a fact. And in this game, it showed. Their fielding was poor. It cost them especially. They could have bowled Australia out for a lot less than 147. They could have bowled Australia out for just over 100 if they caught well, but they dropped a few catches. The ground fielding was poor. The drop catches, Salman dropped a catch, Rizwan dropped a catch, Azam dropped a catch, and they were pretty straightforward. The ground fielding was poor as well, and the stops on the boundary were poor as well, and it was just pretty poor. And in T20 cricket, your fielding's going to be on, and it was not certainly on for Pakistan in that game. And then the third and final game in Hobart, it's where it fell apart. The batting failed, all out for 117. They got off to a good start. They made 1 for 58 in the power play, then lost 9 for 56 in a batting collapse. You're just not going to win games from that position in a T20 match. Just like in Brisbane and Sydney, the same thing happened again. Batting collapse, lost wickets in clumps, no partnerships. No one really got a big score. There was poor shot selection, poor game awareness. Babar Azam looked set. He was going to go and get a big score, but then got out. And then the bowlers really didn't have enough runs to play with. 117 was not going to be defendable. And that's what happened. Marcus Stoinis lined up, Haris Rauf in particular, and the other Pakistan bowlers and teed off. And that's why he scored 60-odd, 61 not out of 27. And Pakistan, just weren't in the contest, really. So looking back, Pakistan will be disappointed. There's still a lot of work to do with the T20 side. The one-day side is making some progress and strides, but the T20 side still got a lot of work to do. And obviously, what we saw from Pakistan at the T20 World Cup this year, there's still a lot of work to do with the T20 side going forward. And this series has highlighted some problems and some areas of improvement that needs to be done. But yeah, Pakistan, when they look back in this series, the batting, the bowling at times was not good enough. The fielding was poor in that second game. If they did the skills better and executed better, they may have had a chance of winning the series or probably just winning a game. But in the end, it was a 3-0 series defeat. And that's probably a true reflection of how they played across the 3 games. They just weren't up to the mark, and Australia were better, really. And that's all you got to say at the end of the day. So for Pakistan, we'll be disappointed with the result, but there's always plenty of room for improvement going forward. Some final thoughts to end our ODI and T20 series review for Australia and Pakistan. The ODI series highlighted some problems for Australia in regards to their batting, plenty of work to do ahead of a Champions Trophy in Pakistan. Pakistan, on the other hand, deserved their 2-1 ODI series victory, their first in Australia since 2002. They could have won 3-0. If they batted better in Melbourne, it could have been a 3-0 result. But a 2-1 series result in the ODIs for Pakistan was a great effort. The T20 series, on the other hand, was a complete one-sided affair, with Australia dominating to win 3-0. The new T20 squad for Australia showed what they are made of, and the future looks bright in the T20 match, or T20 format, I should say, for Australia. On the other hand, Pakistan will rue their poor batting and inconsistency throughout the series, but they will take a lot out of this series going forward as a T20 side. Thanks, everyone, for listening to our ODI T20 series review between Australia and Pakistan. If you're watching or listening to this episode of the podcast on our YouTube channel, let us know your thoughts on this ODI T20 series between Australia and Pakistan in the comments. We would love to hear what you have to say. Thanks for watching and listening. Until next time, keep safe and bye for now.